Hello, Taylor Elwood here, and welcome to my latest video. It's been a little while since I've done one of these. I've been busy, I've had some life changes, new hair, all that other fun stuff. But I wanted to discuss I wanted to continue my series on the inner alchemy of life, and specifically on the physiological aspects that I was discussing before. So I wanted to talk a bit about how my system evolved over time. As I shared originally, I had come up with this system as a result of depression. I was 20 years old at the time, and I wanted to figure out a way to basically resolve the issues that I was experiencing at the time by using the neuro transmitters and hormones of the body in order to help me with this process. And what I ended up doing at the time is I developed a path working that allowed me to where I basically um, brought my consciousness down to that of a blood cell, and then I traveled with the blood cell throughout my body and went into my brain, went into various parts, and got to know my body. And what this ultimately did is it allowed me to get to know the body better. And it allowed me to start working with the physiology of the body. I wasn't just working with neurotransmitters though. I started working with the organs of the body. So for example, I use this as a way to get to know my liver or my kidneys or my heart. And this is something that I would really advocate for in doing this kind of work, that you can get to know the different organs of your body and communicate with them in order to better enable yourself to connect with the body overall. I connected with my skin. I connected with my eyes, ears, all those different things. So this is something that's important to remember. But then I also started connecting with the neurotransmitters and the hormones. And when I first started with, I started with serotonin. I adjusted my reuptake cycle for serotonin, which basically created an experience with the serotonin where it lasted longer in my brain. So I found this to be a very interesting experience, and it prompted me to continue doing the experiments. So what I started doing is I started working with the other neurotransmitters, and I looked at working with dopamine. I looked at working with epinephrine and norepinephrine. And if you're not sure what any of those are, I can tell you. Well, one thing that you can do is, get some basic books on neurotransmitters. You'll learn stuff there, but you can even look this stuff up on Wikipedia, and the information there is relatively reliable. I know that a lot of people are like, well, it's Wikipedia, but honestly, you can get a lot of reliable information on Wikipedia. So what I ended up finding is that when I started this process of transformation with with the neurotransmitters, it helped me to it helped that I started the process first with personifying them in some form that was anthropomorphic. So, for example, with serotonin, I asked serotonin to appear before me, and serotonin appeared as a snake. I could relate to a snake. When I connected with dopamine, dopamine appeared as an old man. So there are different ways that you could, with this initial process, you could take this idea of working with the neurotransmitters and connect with them in a really meaningful way that would help you understand how they wanted to connect with you, but would allow you to connect with them in a way that made sense to you. And this really is kind of the basis of how a lot of spiritual work is done. But you can also see that this is where I began to transform my system, because with the spirit work in general, because once I'd communicated with serotonin in a way that was humanocentric, basically some where serotonin assumed a form that I could relate to, and started speaking in a language that I could connect with, I wanted to go deeper. So I asked serotonin if it could take me deeper into it. And what it did is it basically allowed me to experience it as a sensation. And what I felt with the sensation is I felt it balancing my brain and basically slowing down the reuptake cycle so that I could feel its presence. And by doing that, it really instructed me on the fact that there was an experiential level that went beyond the conceptual. So the initial path working was, let's have the neurotransmitter or hormone or organ or whatever show up in a form that I can communicate with. And that's conceptual. It's conceptual because it's based on a humanocentric tendency and perspective in terms of how we communicate. But for the perspective of what we were trying to do, it basically going deeper and becoming more a sensation, it moved out of conceptual to experiential. And the experiential component was directly allowing myself to experience how that neurotransmitter or hormone expressed itself through the experiences that were available. So I ended up trying that, and what I discovered is that it was a very rich and deep experience that was nonverbal. There was no written or verbal explanation of language, and there was no anthropomorphic shape. Serotonin didn't show up as a snake. Serotonin just showed up as this pulsing red experience that allowed me to feel calmer and more stable and less stressed. And I started doing this with the other neurotransmitters, and I noticed similar states of being. Each state was unique to the neurotransmitter that I worked with. So, for example, when I worked with DMT, it was very much a psychedelic state of experience that I experienced. And DMT is natural to the body. It's not something that's just external. So that's an important thing to remember, that we have a lot of these experiences within us already, and that sometimes what's really being activated is the neurotransmitter if we're taking like an entheogen or something along those lines. The one thing, though, that this experience also taught me was that by working with a given neurotransmitter or hormone, what I could discover was how that actually had guardrails in place. And what I mean by that is that the guardrails would essentially not cause me to go overboard. So, for example, when I worked with dopamine, instead of having a dopamine hit where, if, for example, if someone was to take cocaine, the dopamine would basically be exhausted from their body by virtue of the effect that cocaine has on the neurotransmitters, and the receptors for those neurotransmitters. Instead of that happening when I was working with dopamine naturally, i.e., through my own body, what I found is that dopamine would only go so far, and the dopamine would be kind of like, well, your body's reaching that limit, so I'm not going to go any further. So there was nothing pushing it past that limit. And I think that's really important too in doing this work. It teaches you about the limits of the body. You can make some alterations to those limits, but even that occurs within specific boundaries that are healthy for the body. It's a good reminder, really, that doing this kind of work can be done in a very sane manner, which allows for, shall we say, a healthy approach to the whole experience. So this was kind of an example of what I ended up learning as a result of doing this work, through the experiential. Now I have all this detailed in my book, Inner Alchemy of Life, but I wanted to share this because it's kind of it's an interesting approach to the whole process. And I think a lot of times when people look at working with their bodies, they don't necessarily think about working on the level of working with like the neurotransmitter or uh, the microbiology of the body, like the bacteria, things like along those lines. And this is a very integral part of the process, and something that can be very transformative in terms of how it helps us negotiate the relationship with our bodies. So this is something for all of you to think about. I wanted to share this further with you. There is going to be more work down the line on this system. And I'm going to actually do another video where I talk about kind of like what's next, where could this go. So be on the lookout for that. But I wanted to make a video. It's been a while and share that with you. Hope you all have a wonderful day. Take care.